So welcome everyone to Functional Wellness Talks with Sonia and Carrie. We're coming back at you again after a very brief moment in time of, we'll call it a little vacation break, more like busy schedules, but we're so excited to be back here with you today. And this topic I'm really excited about because it's something I personally struggle with myself, and that is hypothyroidism. I don't have Hashimoto's, but I know there's so many people that do. And Carrie is like a wizard when it comes to talking about this topic. And so I actually have a pen and paper here, and I'm going to probably end up taking some notes, Carrie, if I can do that and still talk. But I really am looking forward to learning more wisdom and knowledge because I know you do a lot of testing around this area and you've got some real insight as to what to do and what not to do. I mean, we know that there are a lot of labs and things that people routinely get done. Here's what I get done, and I would love your feedback on that, and then we'll dive right in. But when I routinely go to the doctor for my labs, as a matter of fact, I have an appointment Monday to discuss my labs because I just had a follow-up visit. And the things that they always check, of course, my TSH. Finally, I got them to check my free T3, free T4, thyroid antibodies, and reverse T3. But that's pretty much it. I mean, there are so many other things I know that can be looked at. So I'm really looking forward to hearing your wisdom on that. So what do you think? Let's dive right in.
Yeah. So thyroid has been a hot button amongst women and men of all ages, from hypo to hyper to Hashi. It's really been a big part of our community. 20 years ago, we would have said Hashimoto. Somebody would have thought it would be a new RC radio or a Kawasaki motorcycle. Right.
Sounds like it.
Right. And then now we are in 2020, and it's becoming a huge epidemic of people being diagnosed with these. And the treatment pretty much is adjusting Armour and P-thyroid. Not much is really done in between, where, you know me, the biological why has to be assessed before we're going to do anything. And so looking at the 9 SNPs, your polymorphisms, we're going back to your DNA. We need to know why this is happening. And so running the thyroid panel of your DNA, it's going to tell you what's caused this to happen to you, and what you need to do to repair it. Hypo, hyper, and Hashi are completely reversible. I've heard over and over again patients in tears saying, I've been diagnosed with Hashis and I don't have a choice. It's going to be this long road of expensive meds, and I can't reverse it. Run if you're being told that, because it is just not true. It is completely preventable, and you can reverse it if you're willing to make those lifestyle changes and invest in your health to understand why you have it. So that's your first step. Now, understanding the thyroid, the HPA axis, hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals, how that works. So your thyroid gland provides oxygen to every single cell in your body. So if it is not working optimally, or if it's been removed, you know, your Krebs cycle is stunted. Your anti-aging cycle, if you will, is stunted. You are oxidizing like an apple cut in half and left on the table. That's what's happening. So how do we get it back up running? How do we know how to do that for you as an individual, instead of just a standard of care box checked in an EMR? So basically, we're going to look at your DNA. We're going to look at epigenetics, how your environment is weakening that polymorphism for you. And then we're going to do micronutrients. We're going to understand what your cells are completely void of. Just because your DNA panel says you need certain ingredients with certain dosings doesn't mean your cells aren't already saturated in them. It isn't a serum test, it's a DNA test. And so we need to get that history together. But understanding first how you said your TSH is checked, your thyroid stimulating hormone. Well, the one thing that should be checked, and often not, is your thyroid releasing hormone, TRH. And that's the precursor of TSH. And so we need to look at that in the hypothalamus to know, okay, this is the first step. Is the first step converting and processing correctly? And then we're going down to the pituitary. The pineal gland has a little bit of an effect that releases melatonin, but it's the pituitary that is the biggest converter of TSH. And then we're going down to the thyroid with T4. And this is usually what's only focused at T4 and T3. Are you making it, and how much, and what are you converting? Well, usually it's about an 80-20 conversion, 80% T4 to 20% T3. T3 is your powerhouse cell. So if we're seeing low T4 and we just give you NP or armor, you haven't fixed the stair steps of why T4 is low, and it's not in place to convert to T3. And that's where you can often see reverse T3 start to creep up, because your body says, sorry, thanks for the extra support. I don't have the ability to use you. And so it's sent right back up to the hypothalamus. And that's when you start getting tons of dysregulation, where hair loss, agitation, migraines, restless legs, even weight loss you can have. And you feel like, oh my gosh, I've lost weight. But then all of a sudden you have no libido and you've lost your hair.
So at what cost did you lose those 10 pounds, right?
Right.
Oh, goodness. What a mess.
Yeah. And then you see a lot of times, instead of testing for reverse T3, we reach for nutrients to help mask symptoms. So say you start losing your hair. And so you go grab biotin, right? Because Dr. Google says biotin grows your hair.
Everybody's favorite doctor these days, especially right now.
Right, right. And there's utility to the internet and the World Wide Web, but we have to understand the mechanism of action of biotin, iodine, copper, selenium, these micro nutrients that we do not need in abundance. And if we haven't run a micronutrient test and our cell is already saturated in biotin, giving more biotin in the body is not going to help you. That can throw off melatonin production in the pineal gland. And that's when you'll start seeing agitation and a hard time sleeping, waking up with a headache, those type of symptoms. And so really, it's just so important that the labs are done and your book is in front of you of, this is me, this is why it's happening, and this is where we need to go forward. Because our food is our medicine, and it isn't just a tagline.
No.
It'd be like pulling up in my Toyota Camry at the gas station saying, who cares? I'm going to put diesel in it today. No.
Wrong choice.
No.
So this is also interesting. So let me back up for just a moment, because as somebody myself that has struggled with hypothyroidism, and I do work with a functional medicine doctor, and I often feel that, well, any physician that you work with or any provider, there's only so much time and so many labs and so many things you can talk about. You could literally spend all day there trying to solve one problem. Mm-hmm. One thing I find very, very interesting is that most people, when they have their thyroid labs checked, literally it's the TSH only. They have to beg for anything, maybe the antibodies if they suspect Hashis, but
right.
Rarely do, I mean, my father also has hypothyroidism, and until I intervened, he'd never had anything but the TSH checked. Mm-hmm. And they kept saying, well, it looks fine. Meanwhile, he continues to feel crummy, and they don't have an answer. You said something very interesting. Is it TRH? Is that
yes.
the one? Okay. The TRH, why are more providers not running that particular lab? Because that to me sounds like the door opener for the rest, yet it's being forgotten about. So would you mind hitting on that? Because I think that's an important piece for anybody that's listening.
Right. Well, one, it is not a part of the standard of care in that EMR checkbox in your system. Mm-hmm. And so when you're at your doctor, some are great about not doing it, and some don't even realize they're doing it. But, they kind of sit behind their laptop punching buttons. That's their EMR hitting next. They ask you a question. That's their EMR prompting a question for you to check a box and hit next. And to me, my OCD comes in and I'm like, wait, have you looked around your computer at your patient? Did you assess who you're talking to? Right. Put the EMR down and talk to your patient. But unfortunately, that's their comfort zone. And so TRH is not built into these labs that the insurance companies force you to use.
Mhm.
Doctors don't have a choice. If you want to see Blue Cross, Blue Shield, United Healthcare, Aetna patients, you will use their labs or they will take their patients from you. And that's how it works. And DLO and LabCorp, these companies want astronomical amounts of money for these lab markers.
So
When
very,
you use a cash-based lab, they're $11, $30. They want $700 for vitamin D. That's highway robbery.
yeah, so interesting.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that you touched upon too was that we get all of this lab work done, and there's so many variables in these labs. And I'm going to go back to myself as an example. Here's what routinely shows up on mine, and there can be some variability. So I'd love your feedback, because I think, again, the more understanding we have of these each individual labs and how they play together, that also feeds into what we do about them nutritionally. So what happens to me historically is that the T3 shows up okay, the TSH shows up okay, and the T4 is in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
And, the only answer solution for most is we'll just up the T4 dose a little bit. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, definitely to me, I would go straight to your genetics. I would look at IL-6, PTPN, and TNF alpha for sure. Those three really pop out. But T4 is a precursor to T3. And so when you're seeing it being drained, you know you're not making enough. And
Mm-hmm.
so you go right back to the pituitary and pineal gland. We look at your sleeping, we look at melatonin, which you can look at in labs.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely look at that. A 4-point saliva HPA uh, lab would be real important. The
Mm-hmm.
saliva is really going to tell you what's happening between that TSH and T4.
So interesting, because I feel like that's a missing piece, not only
Mm-hmm.
for myself, but for a lot of people. So then let's take this concept of you have this information, which again, and I'm in the healthcare space and I don't even fully understand it. So you take the average person who has very limited knowledge on this, and they're sent home and told just to take these medications, and if there's nothing you can do about this condition. We know that there's a lot that you can do through natural means, through other testing and investigation. So we have the genetic testing. We've talked about, in the past, we've talked about epigenetics and looking at how your genes are behaving and what nutrient deficiencies are resulting because of that behavior of your genetic expression. How do you think all this feeds back into the thyroid, and how could we bridge that information together to really give somebody a complete picture of what's going on with their thyroid?
Yeah, I really look at it as anti-aging because most people, they hear anti-aging and they're like, well, I don't want to get old.
That's
Right.
right.
But it is, our thyroid feeds our Krebs cycle. And if our thyroid is not optimal, our Krebs cycle is not optimal, and vice versa. Just, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And so we got to keep that powerhouse of the cell, our mitochondria, healthy and vibrant. And so just like somebody goes in to get Botox, right? That's anti-aging, or Juvederm, Dysport, all these awesome things we have available
Mhm.
to topically prevent the aging process. Well, the thyroid is a natural gland that was made to do that for us internally. And so when it's not optimal, you're aging faster. And that's why it's so important to get your micronutrient panel done in conjunction with genetics, because we could very well be able to see that, oh, selenium is way too low, or your omega panel is way too low. And that way we can really go back to the pathway and feed it what it needs instead of just masking symptoms.
That's so correct, because there's so many people that get out, a journal article, or they go on a website and they, kudos to them for wanting to do a little study and to your point, visit Dr. Google and find out the best diet for thyroid or the best foods to eat for thyroid, and put it all kind of in a box.
Yeah.
And that, because you and I both have hypothyroidism, this is the diet we're supposed to follow. These are the nutrients we need, when in fact, that's all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that's a strong statement, but you and I are different people. Now, while we know that it's very good for both of us to eat more fruits and vegetables, you may need more of one type of fruit or vegetable than I do.
Yes,
My
that's right.
genetic tells me that. I have obviously different needs in terms of underlying nutritional deficiencies. I have different conditions, perhaps in addition to thyroid, that maybe cofactors are not getting along well. There's so many factors, and yet the information we're given is very limited and it's one size fits all.
That's
And
right.
so I love that technology allows us to really look at what's going on so that we can optimize and come up with the best possible nutritional solution for somebody. And that's
Yes.
different for everybody. And
Yeah,
that's what I
it
find
is.
so fascinating about all of this. So it's the thyroid is what opens the door to more research because somebody's having a thyroid issue. But what they uncover by doing genetic and epigenetic testing is a whole nother layer of things that, to your point, when we first started talking, if we just fix those underlying things,
Mhm.
do you really have that thyroid problem?
Right.
Or is it because your body's so out of balance that you've been told you have that thyroid problem?
That's right. Yeah. And usually, our DNA is our DNA. We can optimize it, but we are not going to become a Ninja Turtle. It's not going to happen in this day and age anyway. In the US of A, it's not going to happen. But but we can optimize it. And you're exactly right of being able to protect our DNA. Just because we identify a SNP doesn't mean that light switch has been turned on. We got to identify it earlier, the better. But when you're waiting until you're sick, if you have Parkinson's and now want to know, that light switch is not turning off. We should have checked when you were young, and then that plan was in front of you your whole life to know how to keep that light switch turned off.
Yes, yes. It's so very interesting. So how early do you feel that people should have this genetic testing done?
Pediatric, completely pediatric. I have tons of pediatricians that I work with that do it the day they're born. It's just a cheek swab, 10 swabs up and 10 swabs to the side. So it's non-invasive, one time only, never going to change. So in those instances, these are families that are usually themselves suffering with celiac or Crohn's or some kind of ailment, and they're wanting to make sure their children don't get it. And so that's usually what's inciting that early on.
Very, very interesting. Well, I think that, in this day and age we live, we have so many more solutions than when you and I were born.
Right.
There wasn't this sort of thing. It was, we knew what we knew, but now we know so much more and we have the technology available to tell us that. But it still comes down to, we can have all of the knowledge in the world, all of the testing done. Somebody delivers the answers on a gold platter. We still have to embrace the lifestyle changes necessary to make the changes to correct the problem. And I think that's where a lot of people fall down. So my question to you is, for thyroid, what are your favorite things that you feel, and again, we can't point the fingers and generalize, but what would you say are some of the things that you've seen work best with thyroid patients overall in terms of supplements?
Well, food, I always say food first, and
Mhm.
that's where usually increasing complex carbohydrates and healthy fats are super important within the thyroid production. Most people are not getting enough fruits and vegetables.
Mhm.
That's where I jump to the fruits and greens, where you're getting 26 fruits and 15 vegetables in a scoop.
Drink it down, yes.
Yeah, super easy. Throw it in your coffee, put it in whatever you like to drink it in. Not whatever, but we're going straight for martinis here, but
You got to try that sometime. It's a
right,
healthy martini, right?
right. But that's going to be super helpful with your ORAC and antioxidants and your fruits and vegetables. But then really making sure you're getting your healthy fats and identifying genes. My genetic panel, when I got it back, I'm 130 grams of complex carbs. That was my second recommendation. The third recommendation was eating more calorie dense foods. And I was really excited to hear that because I'm always harping on women. It's okay to eat. You need to actually eat more.
Mhm.
We're still stuck in the snack world generation where we eat as little as possible and what we eat are carbs.
Yes, but they're good carbs, right? I
Right.
liked the snack well generation where we could eat as many cookies because they had no fat. It was kind of fun
Exactly.
while it lasted. Well,
Right.
I think that's so interesting. So the place where I see a lot of people fall off is they don't know what the answers are. So therefore, every year there's a new something that comes out:
Yeah.
keto, paleo, macrobiotic, vegan,
Yeah.
whatever the case might be, in 15 different variations of those things. And they assume because it's the new trend that they're going to jump on that train.
Mhm.
And what I found is that, and it's the same thing with micronutrients, right? So we have different needs in terms of macronutrients and the type of eating plan you should follow. And this is no different than when you have information about your thyroid. There are certain things that you want to do differently in general when you have a thyroid condition or take thyroid medications. But even that should be more specific based on the findings of your DNA test. And of
Yeah.
course, if you look at your epigenetic biomarkers and the way your body is actually behaving right now, it's kind of what I refer to as taking that unchangeable genetic information and looking at a moving target of what has started to happen. And let's
Mhm.
capture that information and make some changes that are realistic, that, through food and behavior change and exercise and stress management and the right nutritional supplementation, that's the key, the right, something that's actually targeted just for you.
That's
That's
right.
where the game really changes. And then lastly, I wanted to say this, and as somebody that struggles again with hypothyroidism myself, we're terrible detoxers. And that's a whole nother conversation. And I know we've done an entire topic on detoxification, but those of us thyroid people
Yeah.
are terrible detoxers. And so I feel that everybody that has a thyroid condition, and of course, always checking with your doctor first, but we not only need to detox daily, we need to do a deep clean and detox, on a regular basis. And there are all kinds of those. And again, that's for another day. But that's the piece I think is missing for a lot of people. We're living in a really toxic world, and this toxic overload, toxic soup that we're all living in, really, along with the genetic behavior, is largely responsible for a lot of different health conditions, and that also includes thyroid. So
That's
it's just
right.
very interesting how it all feeds together. And
Yeah.
I've learned so much about this, and I know you have as well too, but as somebody that suffers from it myself, I tend to be very in tune with what's going on and always looking for those next solutions. So I so appreciate this conversation today. It was so very helpful for me. So just in closing, I know we covered a lot of different things. Is there anything that you feel that, if there was one thing people should know about, looking further into their thyroid, is there one thing that you can think of that most doctors aren't going to tell you that you should do?
Your DNA. I always say test, don't guess. Do your DNA. My origin is what I use because it's completely non-invasive
Okay.
and affordable. You're not going to have to budget it for months to fit it into your budget. Not another $1,000 lab. But your DNA, you got to do your DNA. It's your story. It'll never change. If you don't know your DNA, you're simply offering symptom management. That's all that's happening.
So true. So that was a really great point for anybody that's listening. You probably aren't going to go to the doctor and be offered a DNA test. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, we see them everywhere. But
Right.
I will tell you that in working with Carrie myself, she knows every gene snip under the sun. So if you all need help with figuring out what genetic SNPs are causing you to be predisposed to these certain things, she definitely can help you customize your DNA test. So for anybody that's listening and needs more information on that, definitely reach out to Carrie. And as far as epigenetic testing, either one of us can help you with that, because it's like a hand in a glove. You need to know what you're predisposed to and where you come from, but you also need to know how your body is behaving right now so that you can take action and, essentially put your foot on the brakes and stop the aging process from happening prematurely. I think that's such a huge part of it.
Right. Exactly.
Well, awesome. This has been such a wealth of information. Thank you so much for your time as always, Carrie. And I cannot wait till we get together and do the next one. And for everybody that's watching, we thank you for watching. And we'll be coming back at you again soon with some great information. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Carrie.